Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with James Fair. James is a Senior Vice President for Technical Operations at Executech, and James is innovating the company's approach to today's complex online security threat, the future of business cloud computing, and how big and small firms alike can prepare for cyber emergencies. Based out of Utah, Executech has seen an incredible growth over the past few years, in many ways due to James's approach to operations and professional training. He is also an expert in leadership development, IT training, and growth strategy through outsourcing. James, thank you for coming to our interview today.
It's my honor, Boris. I appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. I believe we will have a very thoughtful conversation on how to start managing your security systems easily, effectively, and affordably, especially in our age of global disruption and work from home. So you are an expert in this. And could you perhaps tell us a short story about what brought you to your current role and what you have been up to these days?
Sure. For me, it started at a really young age. I'm an old guy. I got my first computer when I was 13. It was an Atari 800. And I taught myself the basic programming language. And that was kind of how it got started. I think my parents bought an IBM PC Junior when I was 18. I dove into that. And I've just never stopped being in tech since then. Cybersecurity has always been of interest to me. I was an IT manager for about 20 years. I moved on and became a director and then eventually made it to vice president and senior vice president. So I've done just about every IT role out there as well.
Interesting. So it's a common path for many leaders in IT space. I remember myself not in a very early age, but in university we had some punch card computers.
Oh my gosh, you're older than I am. Yes,
I am an older guy. Yeah, I know that our current generation will look for me as another dinosaur. But
yeah, I did that in school. But just for practice, we never had to do it for real life, fortunately.
Yeah. So what do you see biggest challenges for organizations they're facing for managing securities, and how companies need to proactively address any issues or gaps in their compliance related to these issues?
Sure. It depends on the size of the organization. I think for the smaller and medium-sized organization, it's how do I do it? How do I implement it? Right? It typically they may not have an IT person on staff, and so it may seem overwhelming. A financial person may take that hat on, and to look at all it takes to be compliant or to be secure can feel very overwhelming to a lot of folks. To large organizations, I think the challenge, all of us are experiencing is ransomware. It doesn't seem to be going away. It seems to be getting more and more prevalent. And unfortunately, the attackers, they know this, right? Criminal organizations are getting involved. State actors are getting involved. So it's growing, not shrinking. And so I would say that, and attackers are realizing that the average user, the poor person who's busy at 6 p.m. trying to go through their 400th email message for the day, is the easiest attack vector. A lot of companies will put multiple layers of security in place, but they're realizing that the busy person is probably the weakest point in the link, and that's what they're going after these days.
Mm-hmm. So how most companies and individuals end up getting hacked? I know this, you mentioned that because of this workload of during their lifetime, and how to avoid this from happening? Is there some system you can recommend?
Yeah, there's no magic bullet to this. I wish there were. I wish there was a one-stop solution that would solve it for everybody. A couple things I'd recommend certainly is the end user training. We really need to teach users what to watch out for, how to be more careful, what not to click on. There's certainly other recommendations we'll put in place. Everybody should have a firewall in place. And you should have some kind of a pen test or an external port scan happen periodically so that you know what your stance looks like to the rest of the world, to the attackers out there. how do we appear to the attackers? Because that's what the rest of the internet's going to see, is your firewall. So what is open on the firewall? What's available? What kind of information can we get from that? I would layer on spam and anti-spam. It's an additional cost, but you're automatically removing email that could be a potential attack vector, and you're saving people a lot of time. Even if 10% of their email is spam, you're saving people a lot of time having to click through and delete things that aren't relevant to their job or their role. And then lastly, I would certainly encourage a couple approaches such as a breach policy. Uh, the time from when someone suspects an attack is happening until someone like myself, can do something about it, that time can be very damaging to a company. So it's super important that all employees know what to do in the event of a suspected attack or breach, and who to call, what to do, those kind of things. And so they should be all trained on that, and then retrained periodically, at least annually, on what to do. That'd be at least the bare minimum I would certainly do.
Okay. So can you share from your experience, what is one major difference between companies that manage this task well and companies that struggle?
I would say it's how busy the people are is what it comes down to. I think for a lot of small and medium organizations, it's probably safer and smarter to outsource that information, to outsource that work to an IT firm. I'm not trying to, it doesn't have to be us certainly, but someone who knows this stuff inside and out and can monitor your systems for you. For large organizations, and for everyone, I would certainly encourage some kind of an anti-ransomware product these days. It's not much more expensive. There's a few out there, and most of these products are doing things a little differently. So our traditional antivirus, someone has to get the bad program, and then we write a signature and we send it out to everybody else, and no one else gets that bad program. With ransomware or anti-ransomware products, we're seeing a behavioral-based model, and I believe the world is going to start going this direction, because now we're looking for activity rather than certain signatures. So if I see, or I being the program, see a bunch of files being encrypted, then that kind of raises a red flag. Say, wait a minute, this should not be going on. If I see a lot of files getting encrypted, then I'll stop that activity. Even though I may not be able to clean it off, I'll stop that activity. And so now we're looking at a behavioral-based model approach, which should be able to stop anything that comes out even in the future, and variants and those kind of things. It's much more of a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach.
Mhm, mhm. So can you share perhaps what's something you or your team have recently achieved that you are really proud of? Maybe some without dropping names, just to understand.
Yeah. I think one of the best things we've done recently is put together a really comprehensive incident response plan. So this is a plan, a full-fledged plan in our case, of who do we contact, who's gonna head up what parts of an incident. If if an incident happens, who's going to react, who do we contact, how do we react to it, what's the cleanup afterward look like, what does contact and communication look like, and we've kind of built into it all of the folks we may need to contact, from lawyers to the law enforcement. The teams are going to be created in that. So I believe this is going to be very key for all organizations in the future, is rather than having to try to figure out how to respond in the middle of an emergency, being prepared for that emergency, having plans in place and having practiced it, do even a desktop, modeling of it will help people be prepared when it really does happen. Hopefully it never happens to anybody in the future, but that's probably not going to be realistic.
Uh-huh. Okay. So I would like to hear your personal opinion. What is a commonly held belief or biggest misconception in the IT security field that you strongly disagree with?
I love the approach that we want to stop the bad guys. That's a great approach, of course. But I think we also, or instead of, no, not instead of, in addition, we need to have the mindset of what do we do when it happens, not if it happens, because everyone's trying to create the if condition. We need to be more prepared for when it happens. And again, I hope it never happens to anyone out there, but should it happen, you're going to be in a much better position if your position and your thinking and your planning has been around what to do when it happens.
Mhm. Fantastic. And what are the trends in the sector that you see and in the coming few years? What is your vision for on your market for the coming period?
We're definitely seeing cloud computing taking off. It's grown, incredibly massive in just a short amount of time, and that's not slowing down. So I believe we're going to see far fewer server rooms and closets full of gear, and instead we're mostly going to be doing cloud-based computing, cloud-based servers. And there are certainly pros and cons to both. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. The ability to, let's say I buy a server tomorrow, 5 years from now, I have to replace that server. And if I grow incredibly in a short period of time, then I may have to replace that server sooner. If I spin up a server in the cloud and I need to grow, I simply add some resources to it. It's a couple of clicks and I've got double the size of the server, and it scales to whatever your needs are. And as the work from home doesn't seem to be going away, right? We're not out of COVID yet, unfortunately. So I think that's going to be a trend in the future. Many organizations may never go back to the office. And in those cases, we need a safe and secure method to connect to the work locations. So we're also seeing what's called virtual desktop or VDI taking off. And that is, I've got a desktop or a Windows, in this case, 10 or 11 machine in the cloud. And I'll attach to it from any device, my phone, my tablet, my desktop at home, my laptop. I'll connect to this remote desktop machine, and therefore there's no actual network connection. I'm only sending screen data. So there's no way for my
Oh,
home gear to infect my office gear that way.
oh,
And it can be done from
interesting.
anywhere that way. Yeah.
Um,
We see a lot of banks and financial institutions do this already and have done it for years, but I think we're seeing a lot more of the industry going that way as well.
Okay, so, for example, yeah, I know you mentioned there's many technologies but there are numerous tools and services available today to bring cybersecurity in-house. And how can CISO, or Chief Information Security or Chief Risk Officers, our main audience, determine what capabilities should be in-house and what should be outsourced from your perspective?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say what your organization can feel comfortable taking on and do well. Like we don't do email. We find a provider of email and we resell that product. So email is not our forte. It's not what we do. So I would say, take that approach. There are people who do whatever it is you're after out there in the world, doing it 24/7, 365. It's their whole focus of their organization. It's what they do. So leverage that. Certainly use your in-house resources, but when it comes to security, there may be many aspects of it that you want to outsource to people who do this all day, every day.
Mhm, mhm. So, for example, if we go a little bit broader, if we take a life or typical risk manager, if there is one thing that they should start to prioritize right now that they are not doing, or another way around, they should drop to the to the back of their mind. What is your opinion on this?
That's a great question. There are a couple answers to that. I would say certainly making sure that you have, I mean, this is going to be very rudimentary, but backups and backups, please. Most attacks we've seen, the ransomware attackers go after the backups and they want to delete your backups before they infect you with ransomware because they know you can recover from it otherwise. So make sure you have some kind of, we're seeing a trend toward what we call immutable backups, or backups that cannot be deleted in the cloud, offsite, very different authentication or credentials, and they're locked away, stored, and secure. That's super critical. You can recover from just about anything as long as you have proper backups. Um, I would also encourage teams to start to have that, like I said, that mindset of what do we do when it happens, not if it happens. And I would also allow your IT organization, if you have one internally, to, let's see, how do I phrase this? I'm an IT guy, so it's going to be from an IT perspective. So a lot of organizations will make decisions for the IT group that the IT group may not necessarily agree with. So allow your IT organization or the part of your company that does that to to be able to push back, to be able to have discussions about that. Some of the things you may be requesting may not be best practices. You may be actually causing yourself some harm by asking them to do things that they don't believe are in your best interest. So allow your IT firm to have some leeway as to how things are done and what should or should not be done in order to maintain security in your organization. And
Mm.
then
Okay.
have some healthy paranoia. I mean, I hate to say it. I'm not saying be paranoid, but have some reasonable, healthy paranoia. And the last thing I'll say is trust your instincts. Almost every attack or major attack out there, when people are interviewed, they come back and they say, "Yeah, I thought something felt off, or something felt weird, or I suspected something." There's probably parts of us, unconsciously or subconsciously, that know things are going on far more than our conscious brains do. So trust that instinct. If you think something's amiss, pay attention to that. Don't just ignore it.
Mhm. Okay, interesting. So with all this tools and technologies that you mentioned, I myself heard at least one technology for the first time. How do we stay current on the cyber threat landscape, and what is the best idea how we can we do this about this?
Um, yeah, that's always a challenge. It's a cat and mouse game, right? We build a better mousetrap, someone builds a better mouse, and then we play this game back and forth with the attackers. Um, I would say, hmm, that's a great question. Probably your best bet is to find someone, if you're not doing it yourself, if you're not the person who's out there paying attention to the market and involved in the field, then know someone that is. Have a contact, have someone come in monthly or quarterly and do an assessment of your organization. At least one big assessment so you know where you stand, and then have someone periodically come in and check things out, because even with our best of intentions, we may overlook things. So it's good to have someone come in, maybe even test your security, right? And see, where are my weaknesses? Where are my flaws? What did I overlook? We, as an organization, we have that done at least annually. Some other third party comes in and tests our system for us and lets us know if we overlooked something. It wasn't a huge flaw, but we found that some of our servers have these remote access tools built into them that still had the default login and password. They weren't accessible necessarily, but it was an attack point that we had overlooked. And until someone came in and showed us that, we didn't realize we had those holes. So have someone come in and point out where your flaws may be.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, I ask this question all of my guests because I'm running a global risk community.com is a online community for risk managers. So what do you think, how we can contribute better to this, better understanding to this complex world of risk from your perspective?
I think it's about helping each other out. I think we are all being a little too quiet. Far too many organizations are getting hit and not saying anything. They're not sharing their learnings from it. I think if we were all on board, all sharing, we could probably, I don't say we can't make this thing of the past, but we could certainly learn from each other. We could share with each other what is working and what isn't. If we do get attacked or breached, what did we learn from it? Where was the attack? How can we prevent it from somebody else out there? So I believe sharing knowledge is a super big key to that. So I appreciate organizations like yours that are allowing people a platform to go share. Now we just need to make sure everyone's doing that, putting their part, and even though it may be embarrassing to say that, yeah, we got hit, I think it's super important that we stop being quiet about this. We need to share information between all of us in order to make us all stronger, better, smarter.
Okay, fantastic. So finalizing, if someone is who is listening to this interview would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would that be?
Major takeaways. Know what your organization appears like from the rest of the internet. Although you may understand your internal organization, how do you appear from the internet, right? So if I were attacking from another country and I was trying to figure out what you do and how you do it and where you are, how much information can I gather? So know your external position, certainly, is one of them. And then the human factor is the other one. Unfortunately, the busy humans are the weakest link these days. It's what everyone's going after. So make sure your users are trained, They're allowed to speak up. They know who to call if they suspect something's going wrong. Train your users. Those are the busy people, and that's where you're going to get the most traction, I believe.
Okay, fantastic. That were all my questions. Maybe if I forgot to ask something that you would like to add to our audience.
Boy, let's see. What would I suggest to your audience? You asked all these great questions. Try not to take on too many items. I know that all of us in all organizations wear multiple hats and we get busy, but I think we can end up missing things, overlooking things if we get too busy. So make sure you've got the right resources to do the security. It's super important these days. Ransomware is just such a horrible thing. I've had the displeasure of having to go look on an attacker's site and see all the attacks that have gone on, and no one is exempt from this. They're going after whoever clicks on things. So it's hospitals and gas stations and pipelines or huge organizations. So please, please, please be prepared for ransomware. That is probably, I think, our number one threat out there. And I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know. But boy, those backups, those are super, super critical. So keep an eye on your backups and lock them away behind, very many layers of security if you can, please.
All right. Thank you, James, for this insightful interview. And I wish you and your company, Executech, steady growth, and hope to see you in the few months and I look for another interview with you. How about your progress and some new tips for our members?
I would love to do that, Boris. Thank you very much for the invitation. Hope and everybody stay safe out there. Thanks very much.
Thank you.